Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn. Welcome to a new Rotten Cinema, where we talk fun bad movies, sometimes good movies, whatever we want to talk about. And As I said, I am your host, Mike Vaughn. I'm a writer for Geek Vibes Nation, and I'm also the author of The Ultimate Guide to Strange Cinema. I also have a guest somewhere.
Hello, I am Andre, and I am also a writer for Geek Vibes Nation.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited because when y'all are seeing this, it will be Friday the 13th. I hope y'all are having some awesome like marathons. But we're gonna be talking about two entries in the franchise that I feel like are maybe not great, but kind of interesting. Um Friday the
Not great
13th.
at all. No,
Wow, okay.
although one of those is arguable.
All right, we're starting hot here. We're talking about Friday the 13th, 2009, and also Freddy versus Jason. Um, I I kind of want to guess. Okay, I want to guess. I think you could maybe justify the remake. Is that right?
On paper, yes. In practice, no.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of things that I enjoy about a movie that misses its mark. Um, the main problem with that 2009 remake is the translation of what was originally intended to be written and what we actually got like from the studios, which has
Okay.
always been a problem. So this time
Um.
it just didn't didn't work for me.
Um. Yeah, so it was interesting because when we kind of were kicking around ideas for what to talk about, I was kind of intrigued because it has been a while since I watched either one of these, and I thought it would be kind of fun to just like tackle it with like fresh eyes, just like I know both films get equal amount of shit and also like a lot of love. Like I think in particular the remake has gotten a lot of like almost like a huge cult following now.
Hmm.
I mean, it was definitely shat upon when it first came out, but there's a lot of people that are pretty big stands of it right now. Freddy versus Jason is a 2003 film, which I think everybody kind of knows this, but it was in development hell for like literally decades.
It's the
They
best name
had
for that too, because that's where Jason is that whole time.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so I mean, rewatching it, I will say my opinion hasn't changed. It is like a shit movie, but I want to give it a few props. Not a lot, but I will concede that it is a really stylish looking movie. Like the atmosphere is way better than I remember it being.
Hmm.
Um, I will say that I mean, bar none, the best scenes are definitely Freddy and Jason when they're like fighting. Like those are like the set pieces of the films. I mean, of the film, obviously, but like I I think the biggest problem I have is like I didn't give a shit about anybody else.
Why would you care about anyone else when the movie is literally called Freddy versus Jason?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter who else is in it unless there's like a Creighton Duke type character from Jason Goes to Hell, which I will come back to because there's a problem there that I have with this movie in terms of the continuity that comes before, and the fact that there's no humans or like relatable non serial killer characters of any consequence is kind of like the biggest pitfall of it. Not to say that most of the Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street movies um, didn't work when there wasn't one. But because they've upped the stakes, uh, there kind of needs to be some sort of balancing, like some kind of like tool of balancing for these two juggernauts of the
Yeah.
80s. Um, and they kind of try to work that in to the plot later on, but it just doesn't quite work in that way. So the end result is just like the audience just saying like fuck everyone else. I just want to see them fight.
Yeah.
This is like forget Batman versus Superman. Like this is the best versus movie of like pop culture icons on the screen.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is this really reminded me of like the really old school like I think Universal was kind of like the first ones to do this like share connected universe
Mm-hmm.
with their Universal monsters, and this definitely kind of reminded me of like Frankenstein meets the Wolfman because
Mm-hmm.
that movie has its charm, I will say, but like it really just isn't great until you have that meetup. Um,
Yeah,
and like it's definitely the case where you're writing it around that kind of team up instead of like doing it the other way around of like having a great story and then putting them in to that and making
yeah.
it kind of
I think part of that is the naming convention because you're naming it like you're already telling people that the lead up to this point doesn't entirely matter unless you figure out a way to do that. Like everyone's gonna notice the scaffolding like that leads up to it.
and they just it's frustrating because they like saddle themselves with some really dumb stuff in this like Freddy or I'm sorry Jason is afraid of water, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um
Which does that's not content that breaks continuity in many ways, and like anyone who's seen more than one Friday the 13th movie knows um, that he's not afraid of water.
yeah, and they break their own continuity in the movie because they see him like in the water like a ton. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
he's practically amphibious.
right. So like you're not even sticking to your own internal logic. Like,
There's that.
um,
He's he's the
um,
guardian of the lake.
yeah, I mean, like literally the first time we see him is like jumping out of Crystal Lake. So
Mhm.
I don't know. But like that's like stuff that the writers put upon themselves, which I don't understand. Like I don't I'm not somebody that cuz like let's be real, like Friday the 13th like the timeline and like the canon and stuff is all screwed up. It's like so
Oh yeah,
hard
no,
to
it's totally fucked up.
yeah, like so I'm fine with like them kind of doing like a soft reboot and like taking the archetype of Jason and then maybe making their own kind of rules. But if you're going to make your own rules, at least follow it within your own movie. Like, you know what it feels like? And let me know what you think, but like, it almost felt like part of that was from like an early draft that just got carried over. And like some of it, like some early drafts got kind of stitched together where
Oh yeah,
like,
I don't know the exact intricate history of this movie's conception, and I'm sure it's had like numerous rewrites. That some part of this just was never attended to, or someone just kind of wrote a throwaway thing about like, oh, Jason's afraid of water and Freddy's afraid of fire, but the method of which that they were, uh, killed or had died in doesn't necessarily equate to like a fear of such element. But I'm totally fine with it being that reductive because this is a really stupid movie. And I don't know. For some reason that like fire versus water, red versus blue element just kind of like makes it a little bit more fun in its unhinged
Yeah.
nature. Um, that being said, though, the scene where Freddy and Jason are fighting in like the boiler room, where it's like he has the red gels when Freddy's in control.
Yeah.
Um, when it switches to blue, it's like the closest thing we've ever gotten to like an Argento-esque like
Hmm.
gel switch with this really cool set direction of Freddy's like hell boiler room, which is essentially like the environment that Freddy died in, um, which is interesting because you would think that's what his more psychological weakness would be, to be in the environment where he was killed by those parents, rather than Jason just being utterly afraid of like a tiny waterfall that just like spills in front of him that his machete can't cut through, even though it's the machete's technically not part of his body. But I digress from that. It's just interesting how they use those. I don't want to use the term color theory here because I don't want to attribute it to a movie like this. Uh, but there's something interesting there that I think the the writers and the filmmaker Ronnie Yu just didn't fully unpack or realize the potential of. Probably because like he knew he was making a popcorn movie. Everyone knew, um, and they just want to get this motherfucker out. Because like, how long
Yeah.
was it? Has it been since they announced a Freddy versus Jason movie? It was like early '90s, or it was like right
Maybe.
after
Yeah. I mean, it
uh,
might have even been in the
Jason Goes to Hell.
80s that this was. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I was looking at the cinematographer because again, the way this is shot and the production design, it is really top notch. And the guy
Yeah, it
that
was some really nice shots.
yeah, Fred Murphy apparently was a cinematographer, but he's worked on stuff like Trumbo. He's done a lot of television lately. He did Secret Window, which wasn't very good, but was I feel like that was good looking.
Yeah,
Stir of Echoes. People love that movie. I do not. But anyways, yeah, the one thing that's also really disappointing, and so originally Betsy Palmer was going to reprise her role for the flashbacks. Are they I mean, are they technically flashbacks? They're like his
they're
um
kind of like flash ins
yeah, like
where
they're
like
like his
he's
mental
visited by the visage.
um
He's visited by the visage of his mom.
they did a great job of casting, but it's Paula Shaw who
Okay.
played her in this. Watching this, it really looks like her for sure. But she wanted like she was talking about like the pay disparity between men and women, and like she wanted I think as much as what some of the other male stars wanted, and they wouldn't acquiesce, so they just recast, and I think that's kind of a shame. Like Betsy Palmer is one of the nicest people I think I've
Mm-hmm.
ever met. Like of all the celebrities that I've met, the two that stand out as like being the nicest, well, there's a couple, but there's a few standouts like
Careful
Tara
what you say
Reid,
now.
right?
They might be watching.
I doubt it. But no, Tara Reid was like so nice. Like she like took her time with fans. She was like even I feel like even if you talked about like Paradise, she was cool with talking about it. Like she was just so sweet. She got like you can tell when people kind of don't want to be there, and then you can tell where people are really engaging with their fans. I know this is a big digress, but I mean some people might like this story. But yeah, Tara Reid was awesome. She was so nice. Like I got to talk to her a little bit about playing Bunny and what Philip Seymour Hoffman was like. But yeah, her and Betsy Palmer were like bar none just the nicest people. But yeah, back to this movie. I will say, you know what, I will give this movie, maybe it's giving it a little bit too much credit, but I do like how um and Ronnie Yu also directed Bride of Chucky, and this very much kind of has that same sense of humor.
Mhm.
It is
Yeah,
very tongue in cheek. It's almost a cartoon at times.
yeah, which I feel is a little bit. It's weird because in Bride of Chucky it worked perfectly. Bride of Chucky is honestly one of my favorite Child's Play sequels,
Yeah.
um, after two. But in a way, if you're comparing Bride of Chucky and Freddy versus Jason in terms of like how wackadoodle they get, Bride of Chucky, I think theoretically is more goofy,
Hmm.
but it seemed like, but when you're watching it, like you already have the suspension of disbelief that came from the Child's Play films that came before it, and you have already accepted like this existence of like a killer doll moving, walking, talking, killing, swearing, and whatnot. But when you put it into a franchise such as Friday the 13th, which has its own specialized brand of wacky and campy, um, but also Nightmare on Elm Street, which is a little bit more grounded in terms of tone, except for some of the sequels that followed.
Yeah.
Um, it seems like it feels much goofier than Bride of Chucky in a weird way. It's almost like one of those optical illusions where like you're looking around the image and it looks like the lines are moving, but nothing's moving. So it seems like one is wackier than the other when you're not paying attention to the other film. I would say that Freddy versus Jason should have gone a little bit more unhinged in that sense. Like, let's make it more comic booky because that was what Ronnie was going for. Was like he wanted to make it look kind of like those mashup graphic novels. Like a lot of people might be familiar with like there was the Freddy versus Jason comics, and then I
Mhm.
think Boom Studios did a Ash versus Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
Lots of those things, and like other pop culture characters jump in from time to time. And I think if we just went for it, like this could have been like its own little like spin-off thing where and that might have been what he was trying to do with this, but because it seemed so connected to the film franchises that came before, for each perspective, like film killer, we kind of attached that continuity to them, and that's when we start like spotting the errors and the mistakes, and then that's where we come up with like the shortcomings and why this didn't work, why that didn't work. So I think it just didn't fully go off the rails enough.
Yeah,
That
no,
being
that's
said, it's fucking goofy as hell, and it's definitely worth like you know a good watch.
yeah. Like, so 2 points. I completely agree. I definitely think that, especially it being like an Elm Street movie where you can literally do anything you want. It's a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing is too, I mean, I guess you're just limited by budget, but like you could literally do anything. I will say the smoking caterpillar or whatever that thing was like maybe the best scene ever.
Yeah, you know what? The Freddy Caterpillar.
Yeah.
I guess they were trying to do a play on Alice in Wonderland there. Um, Honestly, it would have worked as its own like fucked up thing. without it being the literary reference it was trying to make.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, the thing is, there's and this might have just been the trends at the time. Um, there are these moments in these early 2000s and late 2000s, as we'll get into it, horror movies where weed humor is like kind of just like insufferably one note. Like you you're just making the same joke over and over in different forms. And like I think I would take out every weed joke in the movie except for that.
Yeah.
Like the Freddy caterpillar thing. And like it's got to be hilarious for someone who's just discovered weed for the first time in their life,
Yeah.
but it really just gets old fast, especially when a lot of states in the US have legalized it. People have just kind of gotten over the novelty of it
Yeah.
all. Um, so I don't know if that's unpopular or not, but uh, it just doesn't hold a lot of water for me. Pun
Yeah.
intended.
One thing I will say is absolute fire about that movie though is like showing a little bit more of like human Freddy, doing a little bit of like a like mini. I mean, it's almost like a mini film of like his origin story, which maybe some people don't like. I actually would like kind of love to see an entire prequel film. Like I think that could be really interesting.
I feel like
So
there was a little bit of that in the first episode of, and this is it's not as a deep a cut as it is anymore because they're streaming now. The Freddy's Nightmares TV show, or
oh,
the first one directed by Toby Hooper,
oh
was
wow.
like the court proceeding of um, Freddy Krueger, and then like after like court exit session, all the parents just kind of like gang up and carpool and then follow him back to his house because they all know where he lives and like just throw Molotov cocktails and torches and shit in his
It
boiler room.
Yeah, and it's nice that they carpooled because that's very environmentally
Mhm.
sound, right? Like
Well, they had to get the fuel for the Molotov cocktails somewhere, so like they had
oh.
some of them had to leave their cars at the courthouse.
um wouldn't it be funny if that was like a night court mashup also?
I would like to see that. Hey, I mean, like Night Court's back, so
Yeah.
they could do it. They could do it, and Robert England is. I think he said he's not divorced or retired from the character in any way. So
Mm,
like
okay.
we could do it.
I will say one thing. I don't see Robert England really like committing fully to like Freddy makeup anymore. Like I have to imagine how grueling that is, like for anybody of any age. And I'm not like being ageist or anything. It's like
Yeah, I mean,
uh
like after a certain point, you kind of feel like Murtaugh from Lethal Weapon. Like I'm too old for this shit. But
yeah.
it's not like you're too old because you're now elderly. It's because like I got better things to do with my time.
Oh
Maybe,
yeah. I mean like
unless they
he
have like a new way that you can just do a latex mask or something. I don't know.
so I don't know if this is 100% true, but like when I was doing like back in oh gosh, let me get my cane out here. Back maybe it was like mid 2000s when I first started doing conventions. Somebody told me that Robert England got $10,000 for a weekend just to be there, and that didn't count like what he was making from like actual like signatures and
Hmm.
like pictures and stuff. Like for a
Like
week,
in Freddy makeup or just him?
just
Just
yeah, just
him.
as him, yeah. Like
It's a
so
pretty
what I'm
sweet deal.
yeah, so what I'm thinking is like not only is he probably cashing some like sweet residuals, but like you do maybe like two conventions a year and you would be like, yeah, I mean, you'd be set.
Good.
But yeah, so I mean, but yeah, I really think like de-aging stuff's getting better. I think you could easily get him like back to do it physically, but maybe like de-age him a little bit.
Maybe. I'm still very like on the other side of the fence with that kind of shit.
Yeah, but it's getting better though. Like
Yeah. I
we've
mean,
come a
there's
long
always
way.
going to be something in the digital effects realm that's going to look
Slightly uncanny.
atrocious even just a few years from now. Like we're going to notice something like, oh, we did not think
Yeah.
about that. Fuck.
Like I'm like the biggest Rogue One stan like ever, but
You're
it just
alone.
what's
Sorry.
that? Oh, you don't like that?
You are alone. No, I fell asleep.
What?
Yes.
So I guess you haven't seen Andor then?
No, not yet. It's on my
So
list. I'm gonna do it, but
okay,
I'm not in a hurry.
but anyways, like I hate seeing Tarkin in that because it
Yeah,
just
that
doesn't look
was
like, yeah, it's a no-go for me. But I still love that movie, but it just takes me out of it. But anyways, like I said, just getting back to Freddy versus Jason, I do love that opening. Like I think that sets a really nice tone. Again, I really wish I could have gotten more of that. Like I just want a whole entire prequel, or just give me a series. Everything's a series now. Damn it. I want it.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, this is the one movie that I would go to bat for like a 3.5 hour version of. Like,
Okay.
give me more of like them two having spats, using kids as like fodder to get them, baiting him,
Mm,
whatnot. Like especially with the early scene where you see Jason in hell, pretty much, where he thinks he's just doing what he normally does in the Friday the 13th movies, where he's just killing teenagers and he sees his mom. And then she says, "Go over here and kill those kids." And he does that. And then she's like, "Good job. Now go over here and kill those kids." But it's really just like Freddy fucking with him, just
yeah.
kind of keeping him up to like this Sisyphean task, which I
Okay.
would have liked to have seen some sort of lead up to, because like I want to see the moment with that where they meet in hell and Freddy realizes he can take advantage of him. It would be like one of the perfect moments for a monologue for Freddy to just like press that against the this manic identity of Freddy Krueger and kind of get to know a little bit more about his like sadistic inspiration,
Yeah.
especially for the kids that he terrorizes in the Nightmare on Elm Street films. He comes up with like wonderfully horrific ways to terrorize and kill these kids. Sometimes it's just like a quick and dirty. My mind goes to the Dream Warriors, where Zsa Zsa Gabor is on TV, and then like, is it the Dick Cavett show or something?
Mhm.
And then he's like,
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
it's the equivalent of a quickie for Freddy. But there's like the other slow burn ones, like I think it's 4 or 5, where one of the girls is like turned into a cockroach, and he like traps her in this box.
You can check in, but you can't check out.
I think that shows the range of like how like there's a lot of stuff going on in the mind of Freddy, and I think like some sort of monologue that exposes a little bit of that, especially from killer to killer, would have been really interesting to see, especially as like the first moment. We could have gotten like a very lightly homoerotic subplot going too,
Okay.
especially
Um
between Freddy versus Jason. You got a dom and a subtype. Um, you can go a little
yeah.
further than you did in Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Yeah.
So
You would have to have Robert Shea back in leather. Like that. That's got
oh
to be
yeah,
that's got to be one of the greatest cameos. Like it's definitely up there in like the most unexpected amazing cameos in horror movies.
dude, Bob Shea did a lot of really interesting stuff for his movies.
Like, what do you think of the makeup? Like, what do you think of like the Freddy makeup in this one?
It's fine. I'm not super eagle-eyed when it comes to like makeup differences for the Nightmare on Elm Street movies per se. Um, I don't know. It looks good enough for me to believe that it's Freddy. I mean, I don't expect that each movie has like the same exact look for Freddy because it is like nightmare logic. He can technically change his appearance whenever he wants, so he doesn't even have to have the burned look to him.
Yeah, I had to say that like I really think like especially some of like the scenes where it's like not to flashback but like the flash in or whatever like with like close-ups of his makeup is like really well done. Like I know this movie rightly kind of gets bagged on for a lot of stuff, but I do think that there are some really interesting or like at least from a technical standpoint, like well done stuff. Again, cinematography is great. I think the production design is really top notch. The acting is okay. I mean, the acting's never great in these. I really like Zach Ward in
Mhm.
like 5 seconds of this movie. That's also fucking bonkers. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
what's
Zach
that?
Ward, and this is like almost kind of like a blink and you miss it, but more specifically a blink and you'll miss why he's in this. Because like it just goes from a photo, but like he's the deceased father
Yeah.
character.
Um, I do not remember any of these characters' names, to be honest. Like,
Nope. No. You would need to come up with a list beforehand. Funnily enough, we were talking a little bit about Red Letter Media before recording. A couple of the guys were talking about the Friday the 13th movies, and they could not remember, even after they had just looked at the names, uh,
ah,
what
nice.
the names of these kids were.
Yeah. Now, one of the interesting things so just so y'all don't think that I'm completely unprepared for these things, I did do some homework and I found some pretty reputable sources that say now, I mean, take this for what it is. It probably didn't get past like the pitch phase, but like Rob Zombie was at one point attached
Hmm.
to this movie. But again, I feel like he's been attached to like everything. Like you name a horror movie,
Yeah.
he was maybe gonna be directing it.
I mean, for the amount of time that this movie has been floating around
Yeah.
studios, being like, it's gonna get made, it's gonna get made. We got a script, we got a script. So many people have probably been attached to this at some point, maybe for like a glamorous 24 hours and then longer from there.
Who who would be your like if you could pick anybody to direct this film, like who would it be?
Assuming it would have been in the same year, say like 2003. You know, maybe even like James Wan, to be honest.
Yeah.
But with the caveat of having Lee Wanell help him just like develop the script or maybe be a producer or co-director in some capacity, because I feel like them two are a pretty good team, at least for the early 2000s.
Okay, yeah, that's I mean, it's funny because I never really considered that, but like I definitely think he would be a really interesting choice, especially since he really seems to kind of tap into like the core of horror, like what audiences really want to see. Like
Yep. And
um
that's that's the whole point of the Friday the 13th series. From part two on, it was a lot of and I say this in the best, most loving way, copy paste formulas,
yeah.
of like this Reaganist attitude of what gets you killed, what makes you deserve to die.
I kind of have a toss up. So one of these directors, and I'll let you guess, but one of these directors actually was attached and does have a connection with one of the franchises. So my choices would be Peter Jackson, or Darren Aronofsky.
Hmm.
Who do you think had a prior connection with the series?
But with which series, the Friday the 13th
With
or
the Elm Street series. Didn't actually end up doing a project, but actually ended up like doing like a script for an Elm Street movie.
okay, so
That
writing a script?
Yeah, like they didn't use it, but like he got
Hmm.
pretty far into
I
production
mean,
apparently.
at this point, like my most educated guess would be Peter Jackson
Yep.
because Aronofsky, uh, early 2000s, he was kind of fresh off of Requiem.
Yeah. Um
It's hard to imagine a studio screening of Requiem for a Dream. The guy's like, that was great. We should get him for Friday the 13th or
yeah. Um
Freddy versus Jason. Like, we found our
yes.
director.
So Peter Jackson actually wrote an unused draft of Elm Street 6. From what people were able to parse was actually, of course, pretty interesting. But yeah, I think like Peter Jackson could definitely tap into that like really weird, grimy, like I'm thinking like his old school stuff. Heavenly Creatures is basically like an Elm Street film because it's so fantastical and dreamlike and like dream logic y.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Maybe that mixed with a little bit of goofiness of like the Frighteners,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah,
but not too
exactly.
much so. Or like Frighteners is
Um,
kind of Scooby-Doo like, but there's something um, that you could take from that that would work in a mashup like this. And Friday the 13th is already Scooby-Doo like enough.
yeah.
Um, the only thing that doesn't make it so is that there's no mystery that anyone's solving. It's just like the legend of Jason.
And I think like Aronofsky, I know that sounds like such a weird choice, but like again, he does sort of like dabble in like the like especially his early stuff. Like I'm thinking like Pie and Requiem from a Dream. Like that is very like cerebral, but very dreamlike, very like strange. But I think he could like he wouldn't be able to bring the humor to it, but I think he could probably bring a really interesting kind of spin on maybe the mythos and the characters and like bringing it back to I don't know, maybe a little bit more
Yeah,
basics.
I would
I
be interested
mean,
in a script from Aronofsky. Maybe not necessarily direction in in those
mm,
terms,
okay.
because
So maybe
like a director can include or ignore different elements from a script. It's not necessarily the script writer or screenwriter who can have like final word on it.
maybe like from a story by Aronofsky and then like written by Peter Jackson and directed. I could see that
Mhm.
working. But we got the movie that we got. It's fine. It's not actually that great, but um I
Yeah,
listen, I still didn't like it. And I mean, I think the characters are absolutely abysmal besides Freddy and Jason, but like I didn't like have a miserable time watching it.
it's good, trashy fun. It's popcorn fodder for sure. And I appreciate how committed this movie is to its new metal soundtrack. That's something
Yeah.
that we haven't mentioned yet is the really nicely inspired new metal soundtrack. I mean, the credits roll to an original song by Kill Switch Engage. When was the last time you heard of a Kill Switch Engage song? For me, it was the last time I rewatched this movie. But I I'm reminding myself that the first time I saw this was I think around uh 2003 or 4, honestly. Um Pretty fresh. And the second time I saw it was a few days ago. So, and I felt exactly the same as I did when I saw it for the first time. And I didn't put any stake in it, so I didn't feel very disappointed or whatever. I just had a good, fun ride. And that's all I kind of was looking for in it.
Yeah, like it definitely definitely bang on with that. Like it definitely feels like it delivers on what it promises. They do duke it out. It is pretty fun. Um, I mean, the story is what it is, and especially if you're just like, so confession, I haven't seen the Alien versus Predator movies, but I gather they're a lot like this, where like the action's fine, but the rest of it's just kind of serviceable to get.
They're far more boring than this movie.
Oh.
But that's the thing that I like about this, is that like you don't give a shit. This movie is entertaining in almost every sequence, because in the beginning you want it to get to that point where you see Freddy and Jason, and then when you see one of them, you're like, all right, then the other guy's around the corner. Something's gonna happen, or we're just gonna get some kill scenes with Jason this time, or with Freddy this time, or like the build up between those like climactic scenes is not very long. The pacing is actually done very well. There's not like a lot of time wasted just like milling around and not doing anything. There's always something going on. Like, you know, as someone who worked on The Phantom Menace said, there's always so much going on in every frame. Maybe not to the extent of episode one, but there's something that's going to kind of just like entertain you or mesmerize you for a little bit until you move on to the next thing.
And I would definitely say, like, just for like final thoughts on it, I'm not sure if there's anything that I can add that we didn't really talk about. I think that it just definitely is kind of like a, as you said, serviceable, pretty much like what you want from a movie. It's still frustrating because I feel like there still is some interesting ideas in there that they don't really take advantage of. And again, they kind of saddle themselves with like plot holes that they write themselves into. But I mean, yeah, it's by far not like the worst like sequel in either franchise, really. So um before we get to Friday the 13th, 2019, what is your favorite Friday the 13th sequel, and which is your least favorite?
This answer changes all the time. This is one of those like, what mood am I in today
Mm.
kind of thing. It's so for the longest time, it's been part six as my most favorite, and it is the most multifaceted sequel because it's not only is it Jason Voorhees, this killer who is then an extension of his mother as the killer, um, in terms of her protecting her son, but it's also like a monster movie about an undead revenant that comes back to life to enact the vengeance that he thinks he's supposed to enforce against these kids. That really works in a lot of ways. But I think right now, my favorite sequel is, and this is specifically the extended or director's cut of Jason Goes to Hell.
Okay.
Um, because we have someone like Creighton Duke, who's a hunter of monsters in a way. He's studied Jason. He knows his entire story, just like everyone who's watched the movies all the way up until this point. So we finally get someone who's caught on to it and is starting to use that knowledge to get the better of him. The thing in Jason Goes to Hell that really makes it my favorite, the inclusion of the cabin from Evil Dead
Yeah.
and the Necronomicon, which has been written in to that film, where Pamela Voorhees was using the book to then influence her son and raise him from the dead should he ever perish. So he's essentially a servant of like the dark ones, almost in the same similar vein, and you could actually pair these two movies together. In Halloween 6, Curse of Michael Myers, where he's
Oh
also
yeah.
a servant to this dark force of the cult of Thorn. But I'm a sucker for like cults and like demonic forces and stuff like that. So it's kind of an easy answer for me. But right now it's part 9, Jason Goes to Hell, the director's cut.
Okay. I also like when Creighton Duke's like he thinks of Jason as a little girl in a pink dress sticking a hot dog sticking a
Yeah.
hot dog through a donut.
Yep.
That's so
It's a great
goddamn
line.
random.
There's so many. I love all the scenes Creighton Duke in it. Like he's
Yeah.
just he chews the
Yeah.
scenery so well.
He definitely makes that movie. So I kind of agree with you. Like my answer varies, but I really want to say that I know everybody loves part 4 and thinks that's the best. And I'm not knocking it, but for me, part 3 is fucking great.
Part 3 is really good, um, especially in 3D because it
Mm.
was shot that way. I was able to do a double feature sometime last year of Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, as well as Silent Madness in 3D, which, by
Nice.
the way, has the same cinematographer, and they use the same 3D photographic method.
Yeah, so I definitely think Friday the 13th part 3 doesn't kind of get the love it should. Like I like the characters a lot. I like the kills. I think that disco intro,
It's the best.
it is the best. It really
Ah,
is. Like
we should put that up
um
at the end of this episode, just so people can
yeah.
jam to it.
Okay, so Gerald Fell, I think is
Sounds right.
he also did Savage Dawn, which I think was like a Red Dawn ripoff, maybe.
Savage Dawn, the brutal tale of a disenchanted Vietnam hero who returns to America and faces a new kind of enemy.
That son of a bitch go, man. He's good.
Sounds right.
Um, yeah, he also did Silent Madness in 1984 and did Friday the 13th Part 2 in 82. And he also did He Knows You're Alone in 1980, the same year as Friday the 13th, the original.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
Steve Miner directed this one too, right? Because he did 2 and 3,
yes.
which is interesting because a lot of people go to part 2 as the best sequel, and
Mhm.
it's a really, really strong sequel. But to
Yeah.
go from what 2 did for Jason, which is a big jump between the original Friday the 13th's Jason, the overt comical nature of 3, for like the tongue-in-cheek treatment of like the situation, the kids, their happy-go-lucky summer retreat thing that goes wrong because they picked the wrong place to hang out. Um, Intriguing about how Steve Miner's able to take those different tones and make them work so well. It's not necessarily different sides of the same coin. For him to go from one sequel to the very next sequel and just make it feels more fun than 2, but 2 is still like very fun in terms of how it's like a bare bones like stalker movie.
I'm not sure if it's my favorite kill definitively in this series, but it has definitely one of my favorite kills, which is like where he's like walking on his hands and then he's like
Yeah,
split
I
right
feel
down the
that every
middle.
time.
Oh, that's so good. And I would say if I was picking my least favorite, I mean, I almost have to say like automatically Jason Takes Manhattan is like
Hmm.
the worst. It's because it's so damn boring and it also is very misleading because it's like they had maybe like a single day to shoot in New York and then the rest is like
Yeah,
Vancouver.
yeah.
Um like it's basically like I've heard a lot of people call it like Love Boat Jason, or Jason Takes the Love Boat, because it's basically on a boat the entire time.
Yeah, I think if it was framed a little bit differently, it would have gotten a different reception, because the kill scene in part 8, like in the party room on the boat, is great. Like when the music
Oh
goes,
yeah.
like the lights are going, Jason's there, and then like no one can hear you when you scream. That is a great sequence, great kill. Even though it's stupid, I love the kill in like some part of the bowels of the ship where the the rocker girl or whatever is like practicing
Oh
with
yeah.
her amp in the bowels of the ship for some reason.
As you do, you know.
Uh and he just like kills her with a guitar, and you know, it's dumb. A lot of things don't work about that scene, but you gotta do something interesting, uh, especially when you come up with a reason why anyone other than the crew would be there. Um, but it's just another set dressing thing. So I still find it quite fun after my initial disappointment of how little of Manhattan is taken by Jason. But I realized also I didn't answer the second part of your question, which was my least favorite sequel. And it's Jason X.
Mm. Do you want to hear something wild? I've never seen that.
You should do that. And
Okay.
like I say it's my least favorite only by a thread, honestly. There's no Friday the 13th movie I don't enjoy. I love them all, maybe not equally, but
Kind of like your kids, you know,
yeah,
you like them, but you definitely have a favorite.
exactly. And like that's a constant between all parents. So to say that it's my least favorite sequel is only really just admitting that it doesn't feel fully like a Friday the 13th movie. There are parts of it that do, and that's mainly because of the holodeck stuff that they, steal the holodeck technology from the Star Trek movies and the TV shows to simulate this environment that Jason's more receptive to and like familiar with, at least before he gets like uh, the nanobots to like repair his body and give him a bitchin' new mask, which I allow. I totally allow. I'm down for it. But it's super fun. It's probably dumber than any of the Friday the 13th sequels, dumber than Freddy versus Jason, and dumber than the 2009 remake.
By the time you're listening to this, will be Friday the 13th. I should just watch it. I know Cronenberg is in it, and that intrigues me a lot.
Forgot about that. Oh, that's such a weird moment. It's like when Udo Kier pops up in like Dracula 3000 for like 10 seconds.
um yeah. I was like looking at like Steve Miner's filmography, and I'm like, a lot of his
He's a
stuff
journeyman.
like is really good. Like he followed up Friday the 13th Part 3 with House, which I
Mhm.
think like splits a lot of horror fans, but I really like that a lot.
House is great, dude. George Wendt, fucking William Catt, those effects.
Oh, those effects are
Um,
great.
and like I'm gonna say right now, like I went to my local video rental store and I rented a copy of House on Blu-ray because I'd like to see it again. So that's what I'm
Um
gonna do with my weekend.
nice. He did Warlock. Now that is one I haven't seen. Have you seen that?
No, not yet. That's one of my 80s holes that I
Okay.
haven't filled in yet. Like any of the Warlock movies I haven't seen yet.
Um, that would be a perfect watch along. I feel like you and I should fill that hole together. I know that sounds awful, but um anyways, but
Yeah.
I'm just looking at like how diverse of like stuff that he's done. I would love Like Lake Placid is another one that's fucking great that I think like people like to shit on, but is a lot of fun. But I think I just want to throw in Rogue there as well as like an
Rogue is
awesome,
great.
yeah.
Rogue is really fun. I wish there was a Blu-ray of it.
Yeah, I feel like we should just do an episode on like killer animal movies and just talk about Rogue almost the entire time. um, but so let's pivot to Friday the 13th, 2009. So my opening thought is, and I think a lot of people kind of say this, even people that don't really like it, has to admit that the first like 25 minutes is almost like a fantastic short film. Like it's almost like
Yeah.
its own kind of condensed, like again, I don't like fan film makes it sound amateury, but like it's just like almost it's like own condensed. I really like how they take the really messy continuity and they like shape it up, and they get the time right as far as like when he's a kid, when he's an adult, like they like
Yeah,
really,
things make a little more sense.
yeah,
Mainly
like
because they kind of go, so they take the first four films and they
mhm.
kind of turn that into one movie, essentially. Well, skipping a lot of the first one because we kind of just jump into when he's fully grown, as you can see behind me.
But yeah, that opening, man, is so good. It's like it's almost like again, it's its own movie, but like it um almost acts as like a perfect homage to the series, like kind of condensing what it is. Like they even do a really cool homage of like the sleeping bag kill, but
Yeah, that's true.
um
Um, they make it a little more sinister, honestly,
mhm.
because
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it's slow roasting of the fire, but it's not really just slow roasting because the sleeping bag literally catches on fire because it's so close to the top of the campfire
Oh,
tip.
that is
Yeah, it was gnarly.
horrific. I
So yeah,
feel like
good kills. Good
yeah.
kills in this one.
Um, I was also like when I was taking notes for this, because I did, believe it or not, as scatterbrained as I sound, but um those guys were definitely going to be killed just from like finding like whoever's farm they were on with like the weed. Like that's, I don't know how many thousands of dollars of weed, probably. I don't know weed prices, but like that seems like a lot. Like that
I
seems like
mean,
cartel kind
if
of.
this is in the relatively New Englandish area, like the original movies were, like New Jersey or whatnot, this was probably not a lot. But if this was set in like um, Humboldt County or some shit in California, then yeah, you'd probably be stumbling onto like a $500,000 operation or something.
Yeah.
But that being said, Humboldt County illegal marijuana growers had some extremely stringent security practices. So Jason actually would have been hunted down and killed more effectively than Creighton Duke would have been able to do if this was set in California. Just saying.
Yeah, I was like thinking the whole time, like, if Jason doesn't get you, whatever like operation is like growing all this stuff is definitely gonna like cut your generals off. Best case
HDF or
scenario.
DEA.
Um, but yeah, I think um outside of like the really good opening, I think it's just kind of an average movie. Like I thought the characters were kind of bland. It's interesting because this was directed by the director of the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you
Mhm.
really get that vibe. But what did you think, like, overall of this movie?
You know, this movie is intermittently just all over the fucking place. But every once in a while it manages to entertain or at the very least just make you just like perk up and just try to process what is happening. And like there's a lot of good things and there's a lot of bad things, and there's a lot of just things that I still haven't fully processed yet. And, like, I've only seen this film twice now, but I know I'm gonna revisit it more. The reasoning that they put behind the progression of Jason as was really well thought out and is extremely underplayed in this entire movie because we have to focus on the kids. And like I was kind of sick of them because there's too many. There's too many kids in this. There's 13. And like I understand the significance of the number, but Jesus Christ, like, cut that in half or something. Because then, like, if we have a smaller group of kids, we can spend more time on the other, like, more mystical aspects of Jason. And I know they didn't want to ruin the mystique of how Jason is, how he came to be. But we already got those. So anyone who's like seen at the very least parts 1 through 4, they already know. There's no mystery. But it's the most like hodgepodgey of any of the Friday the 13th movies. There's a little blink and you miss it moment in the tunnels, which is a great way to introduce how he can get around without even like being seen, like seeming to like teleport and pop up in just areas where in the tunnels you can this might have been cut actually from the movie, but they wrote in something where there was a wheelchair, like an empty wheelchair, and like an old ragged sweater. And anyone who's seen parts 1 and 2 would know the sweater is his mother's, and the wheelchair is the kid from part 2 that gets like fucking thrown down a set of stairs. Just the fact that they kind of gave the environment a lot more thought is really admirable. But again, like the attitude of focusing on the adolescent drama and the interplay between these kids, there's really nothing there. Like they're focusing too much on one far less interesting party of the film than it could be, kind of instilling a sense of like mystery and dread for this poor figure of Jason Voorhees that they didn't quite hit the right balance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, outside of like the first, I guess, like 20-ish minutes, like there's not a lot that I really remember from this, only just that it kind of had that sort of like Texas Chainsaw kind of like flair in kind of how it was filmed. Like there was some locals that gave me very much like Texas Chainsaw like vibes. So yeah, I mean, it was very repetitive. I didn't really like any of the characters. I'm trying to think what movie I like hated the characters more.
See, that's a more interesting question than which one is your least favorite sequel?
Yeah.
Which sequel did you hate the kids the most?
Like, yeah, I mean, like at least in Freddy versus Jason, like I mean, at least in like the Friday 13th remake, like you didn't have like overt homophobia like in Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah,
So it
that's
kind of
right.
makes
No, I forgot to bring that up.
yeah. Like I vaguely remember that, but then when I watched it, I was like, ooh, wow.
Yeah, there's this one moment in particular that I remember where the F word is used, and it's not that F word. So
Yeah. So I was like, oh yikes, I like her even less. I mean, her death is like comically like swift, but
it's It's got one of the most entertaining and quickest to the point kills ever. And
Yeah.
I could watch that over and over again.
Yeah, like on a loop. Yeah, no, I would definitely say I think I hate the kids in Freddy versus Jason more because I at least found some of the kids in the remake kind of tolerable. I mean, that's not saying much, like barely tolerable, but you
Yeah.
definitely are happy when they die. But I mean, that's the thing that people forget. Like in this like Friday 13th series, there are some really like likable characters. Like
Mhm.
they're not all just like it's interesting because like this is kind of my biggest problem with the Friday 13th remake. Like they kind of like they distill everything into like this archetype of like all these teens are shitty and one dimensional, so you don't care if they die. But like if they really were fans of the series, like there's like some great characters from throughout the series that like
Oh yeah.
Shelly, for example, in part 3 is like a complex character that like you really kind of root for, but then dies, like I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's more hardcore fans out there that could like rattle off their favorite like characters, but
Shelley was mine for sure because I identify with him a lot when I was watching these movies, and I decided to watch them as a teenager. It was very much saw myself in the plight of his position.
again, that's like what I think that like these directors kind of don't understand is like you can make interesting like relatable characters. I mean, I guess like like in the remake, like you're supposed to like was it the Eccles guy? Jared Padalecki
I
was the
haven't
other
watched Supernatural,
supernatural
so
guy. I know Eccles was like or however you say it is like the other one. But like I know
okay.
you're supposed to like him even though he's kind of like bland toast.
Yeah,
And I guess like
he's like
his
eye candy or whatever.
yeah, which I'm like, it's wasted on me. And then I guess like Whitney like is the sister and you're supposed to like her, but like
Well, she doesn't do much. I mean, other than
yeah.
being kidnapped because she looked like his mom.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because they find that like locket or whatever in the
Yeah,
house.
and she
That's
looks
one
like his mom did when he
yeah.
was her age or something.
I will say, like, as much as I'm like kind of crapping on this movie, like it is again really well shot and the production design is great. Like that whole sequence of like his old house, like
It's great.
pretty
It's really
great.
cool.
Um and another good thing I will say about it is I like this the Jason in the 2009 film, Derek Mears.
He does a really good job, and he had a really nice approach to playing Jason.
I mean, I like how I never felt like he was trying to copy Kane Hodder's Jason.
Mm-mm.
Like he definitely felt like he was kind of doing his own thing, and yeah, it translated really well. And I will say something controversial here. Um,
Okay.
so I think the jump scare in this film is better than the original. When they're at the dock and you think like, oh, they're safe, they're fine or whatever, and like he
Ah,
pops out of the fucking dock.
yeah, that conceptually, I agree with you 100%. Um, but in the way that like the shot was set up and framed in the original Friday the 13th,
mm,
I much preferred that. Like just the artistry of like setting that up and just the concept of Alice being in the lake. It's calm, it's serene. You're just kind of like maybe dozing off or staring off into space, and you're just like letting yourself mentally relax and unwind from the hell that you just escaped from. And then having this like whatever the fuck that thing is jump out of the water and grab you, even if it's not gonna like it's not strong enough to crush your windpipe or anything like this Jason is. it's like elements I would take from both to create like a composite in my mind.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like I will say that like it like the original is a perfect setup and payoff, but maybe I'm just like I've seen it so many times that it never like gets me. But like when I rewatched the 2009 one, I granted it's been a while since I seen it, so I completely forgot that there was a jump scare there, and it did get me. So
Hmm.
I did like that. I was like, good on you. I will say I'm also kind of looking at that Marcus's IMBD, and he did a lot of music videos, which isn't that crazy because that's what a lot of like filmmakers
Yeah.
got their start. But he did the Spiderweb video for No Doubt. So there's a cool little bit of trivia.
Hmm.
And did a lot of stuff for a lot of various artists like Cher, Billy Joel, Bush.
Bush,
Um,
I see him doing a video for Bush for sure.
yeah, it's like pretty eclectic, but yeah, I will say that like both films I will say didn't bore me. As much as like some of them were very uneven to various degrees, like I never like actively hated my experience watching it, which doesn't sound like a great endorsement, but like
It's not nothing though. Don't
yeah,
get us
like
wrong.
um and I know like the 2009 film has a ton of fans, and I will concede that there are things that I like about it. I just don't know if like it all kind of gels together. Um
It's very patchwork.
mhm.
Um it's like an if you don't like this, maybe like step out for a smoke and come back in like 10 minutes and like you'll like this part next
Yeah,
kind of thing.
which is kind of funny because I really like the Texas Chainsaw remake. Like I think it's not like it's nowhere near like the original, but I like the style. I like how grimy and gritty and like sun baked and
Mhm.
pretty nasty it is. Like I think that's a more consistent movie than this.
I'm going to be the detractor on this one because of the two remakes that I guess Marcus Nispel directed, since he did both of them, uh, I prefer this one. And
Okay.
I did not really enjoy the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake.
Okay. I
The
feel like
sequel to it's better.
yeah, I did remember you not liking this or the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which it is by no means perfect, but I definitely like think he nailed that at least tone. And
It's
I know
true.
I think you'll agree with me on this. Like the closest match to the original was um Next Gen or Return of Texas Chainsaw
Mhm.
Massacre. Like that movie rules. That movie really got the humor and satirical edge that Toby Hooper had, better than any other like sequel or remake or anything.
I think most of that's attributable to Kim Henkel kind of
Yeah.
having creative control over a lot of things. It's like he's except for the one that he directed, Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. Um, he has at least served as a producer or an executive producer in some capacity. Even
Yeah.
the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like he had something to do with that one too.
Which, bringing it back to Night Court, had John Larroquette. He did the
Hmm.
narration for the
There's our
original and the remake.
we're
And
it's gonna happen.
yeah,
We're making it happen.
all of these worlds are colliding. It needs to happen.
In the mid to 2010s, say, I discovered this TV show that had since been canceled and is now about to come back. The show in question was Party Down, and
Hmm.
I cannot stress enough, and this is going to seem like kind of left out of left field, but um, Party Down is one of the funniest like situational comedies from a premium cable channel. I think it was Stars. It's just like a catering company, and all these kids are working in it, and none of them want to do that for business except for the boss. And one of these kids is um let's say he's kind of relatively good looking. He's like blonde hair, kind of looks vaguely emo-ish. This is around the same time that like that look was very popular, and as such was in 2009 earlier. And his character is an actor who is trying to, audition for all these roles, and a lot of other people who work for said catering company are also trying to get their way into the entertainment industry. Like you get a script writer, some actors, you get a comedian, someone who's worked in commercials before. Um, and this character is played by the actor Ryan Hansen, who actually stars in the Friday the 13th remake, looking exactly as he does in Party Down. And it's not something that took me out of the movie, but being familiar with his character, I immediately wrote this into my head as a movie that is connected to the Party Down universe,
Okay.
where he finally lands that role, and then you see him, and then that's when you get to cheer for him.
Fuck you, bitch! You just took the master class. Boom!
I don't know, just that extra little angle to it, I think, makes it a little bit more fun, because as interesting as this remake is in terms of the creative choices that are made, good and bad, this kind of adds um, a little humor and spice to it. So as a recommendation, I would say anyone who has not seen Party Down, watch every season, and watch Friday the 13th, 2009 again, and you will know what I mean. It would be great if we got some sort of like reference or mention of this in any way in the new season that's coming out next month, which is really soon. So we're probably not, but it's a nice little thing that I like to think about.
Yeah. These are two, I mean, again, I'll just say I didn't hate watching either one of these. Like, if I had to pick one, I would say, gosh, that's hard.
Come on, it's just like one of your children. Which one are you going to kill? This
Both
should be
of them.
easy.
Just drown them both. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, if it makes the decision any easier, just know that the writers for the 2009 remake are two of the three writers who also wrote Freddy versus Jason.
Oh wow. Okay.
So it's
Um,
it's more like, which of my projects did you like more, Dad?
if I'm being completely honest, like if there's one that I'm gonna revisit again, it probably would be Freddy versus Jason, just because it's a little more over the top. It's a
Mhm.
little more fun. Um, it kind of, again, it face plants, but it does it in such an interesting, I don't know if I want to say interesting way, but like it definitely takes some big swings. Some of them work, some of them don't, but it's still kind of fascinating to watch. So yeah, I would probably say Freddy versus Jason for me out of the two.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, which is it's really too bad, because the 2009 Platinum Dunes remake could have been something a little bit meatier to chew on, but I think there were like two different minds at play here. Somewhat like one approach that wanted to be as vapid as the 80s sequels were, but those had like an unintended side effect of having this notoriety attached to it, especially with like the legendary cuts that the MPAA imposed on them, and like that footage is gone forever. Like we're never gonna see those extended kills or like gore effects that people worked so hard on. Um, but it's almost like the attitude comes across as like a pseudotronic way of thinking of filmmaking for a horror franchise. And by pseudotronic, I mean like when you take something so genre specific as like horror, science fiction, fantasy, anything that's like decidedly not like maybe an awards contender or like a drama film or something that's meant to be taken seriously, but something that tells the audience that they know they're making something that's less than. A lot of people would attribute like the films of Trauma to that relegation of pseudotronic, but that paired with what they were trying to do for the character of Jason, that was so earnest and so really interestingly well thought out, that just didn't get the appropriate amount of attention to really develop and blossom to make the movie feel as meaty as it's trying to be. This really betrays the other side of it. We're like, yes, there are Friday the 13th movies that have like this tongue-in-cheek campiness to it, but none of that was intentionally so. They were, I mean, honestly, what they were trying to do was make money off of the franchise. So they just repeated the same formula over and over again, but they didn't quite take the approach that was necessarily required to not make this a film that people should take seriously, but something with a little bit more thought behind it than just let's get this money and go on spring break, as Alien says in Spring Breakers. And the 2009 remake also made me laugh the hardest out loud the first time I saw it. And like, I got to mention it here. There's a sex scene, of course, in the 2009 remake that it's mid coitus. This character named Trent is like, let's say he's going to town, and he says one of the dumbest things during sex that does not ruin the moment, and that is, "Your tits are stupendous." That was the moment that I was like, okay, this is a point of no return, and I can't think of this in like the more serious tone that they're trying to convince me of. There's too many things going on here, so you just have to let those stupendous tits guide you into camp. But that's the problem, where the camp isn't all there. It's a half-baked camp, so when it's there, it's glorious, but there's really not that much of it. So between the two, honestly, like I'm gonna dump the 2009 one.
Yeah. That's a really great point too. It's like I feel like you're absolutely right. Like they never, like there's humor, there's definitely some tongue-in-cheek humor in the remake, but it's like they're so self-conscious of like fully committing to it, even though there is like some absurd shit.
Yeah.
And like stupid as hell lines and stuff. I mean, it's such a shame because I feel like there's a lot of like interesting, yeah, like even like good, even interesting things about the remake. It's all half measures. It's like nothing's ever like fully committed. Like it has a really interesting style, but it really has no soul. Like it just feels very like,
Yeah.
I don't think it feels cynical, but
No.
I feel like it still just feels like hollow. There's just something missing where like y'all had the funds, and you could have picked any writer you wanted to. You could have made such an epic remake that like everybody wanted.
Paramount gave them the whole sandbox. They could do whatever they wanted, and that included the title, the characters, anything that happened in between the first film and the 10th film. Yeah, I understand the need to pay homage. That's respectable. That's understandable. I think that might have bogged them down in this case.
I know I've said this 1,000 times, but like the first 30, like 23 minutes of the movie is amazing. Like it just has so much energy and love, but then that just kind of drops off, and it never really feels like it reaches that heights, like that specific height again.
Let's not forget too, like in that first 20-30 minutes or so, we do see Pamela Voorhees, played by Nana Visitor, who is, if anyone, like I mentioned Star Trek earlier, if anyone is a fan at all of Deep Space Nine, aka the best Star Trek series, they would know that she plays a very major character, and there's a pun intended there because she plays Major Kira. And honestly, I would have much preferred to see more Nana Visitor as Pamela Voorhees. Maybe not in the capacity of like the flashback or like a lead up to how Jason got to who he is at in present day 2009. But if there was some kind of way that they could have used how his mother was used against him in Freddy versus Jason, which these guys wrote, they could have just done the same thing and it would have worked better.
So, what do you think of this series? I'm really excited. I believe it's going to be like a straight up prequel.
Mhm.
I know you're a comic book person. Did you read any of like the this was it I'm trying to think if it was it was like a limited series maybe, or maybe just a one off, like a one shot, but there was a really excellent like Pamela Voorhees comic that I really liked.
I actually haven't heard of that.
Yeah, if like if you can find it, feel like it's probably not hard to find. I think it's like only a couple issues or whatever, but it really like dives into like her history, like who's Jason's father, like how he was like an abusive asshole and she kills him, and like it really just brings her character to life. And like again, I just kind of want to see more of that. Like I feel like maybe they're like we're finally at a point where like we can do like a series like that where like Jason necessarily like isn't like the main boogeyman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's all like his mother's imposing nature, really. Like, if anything, a lot of people say that Friday the 13th is largely a Halloween ripoff, and I get that to some extent, but that's only really in terms of like the use of masks and the rules of like the slasher. But I really kind of see it more of a like a spiritual, a reiteration, reinterpretation of Psycho for me. And the mother and son dynamic is really what's at the heart of it all. Even if, like, for the majority of a lot of these Friday the 13th movies, it may not seem like it very much, except for parts 1 and 2 and 3, because 3 starts with a close up of like the decapitated mom's head, and then it hits the disco theme. But then, yeah, it's that whole underlying theme. I don't think is mined as exploitatively as it could be, but respectively so. Like, there's something not like sacred about it, but there's something a little bit more respectable about how that is a known undertone, and the filmmakers as well as the audience have the same amount of respect for the relationship between Jason and his mother that that Jason has with his mother, where it's like that's the one thing that everyone can kind of get to the same terms on is that deep connection between him and his mother.
You're totally right. They never really explore in some of like the newer stuff. Like, I mean, I guess like I did like how Pamela makes a pretty prominent, although like very brief kind of appearance in both of those films, but like yeah, I'm like ready for like a solo thing with her as a character and like this
Yeah,
dynamic. Like it kind of gives me like Bates Motel sort of vibes.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. You know, when Brian Fuller's on something,
Yeah.
he knows where to take it.
He would be somebody that would be like a dream interview. Like I would love to like pick his brain
Oh
about
god,
that, about Hannibal, like pushing it.
Voyager. I want to talk Voyager with him, specifically Borg Voyager.
So, to end this on a positive note before I like I'm sorry y'all had to hear me cough interspersingly, but I am still getting over like a cold, which sucks. But you know, I like talking all this crazy shit, even if it is kind of shit. To end on a positive note, like I said, none of these movies bored me. Like, and that's like to me, like the Cardinal Cinema movie is like, don't fucking bore me. Even if it's dumb as hell, just be entertaining. Like, just give me something.
Yeah, just own it. Just take it, run with it. Don't be afraid. It's fine. You can be stupid and fun and entertaining. You
Yeah,
don't have to be thoughtful at any point.
I think that's it for this episode. I hope y'all had a fun time listening to us ramble about the movies, sprinkle with some trivia that you probably all like. I'm sure the diehard fans already knew, but
Yeah.
anyways, I had fun. I hope y'all had fun listening to it. But before I sign off, where can the good folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter as of right now, and Letterboxed, and my blog Celluloid Consomme at medium.com, as well as Geek Vibes Nation for various reviews here and there. You can also find me on the Humanoids from the Deep Dive podcast, where we talk monsters and philosophy and a lot more deeper stuff. Sometimes
Sometimes.
deeper stuff, sometimes not, sometimes decidedly so. But for Twitter, it's going to be the handle at Demoni Disco, and the letterboxed handle is Hamburger Harry. I would also throw in there, there is a user on Twitter as of right now still. They're still going at it. It's the Pamela Voorhees account. And
Hmm.
if you haven't experienced this account, I would take advantage of it before Twitter explodes. They always tweet in character. There's also a
Always.
Crazy Ralph Twitter account, which they sometimes do a little back and forth, which is fun.
Nice. I love that. But yeah, so I am also on Twitter for now, at Strange Cinema 65. That's where you can find all my ramblings, rants. It's not that ranty. Like I just like post my articles, my videos,
Mhm.
my letterboxed. If y'all are on that, I'm Kubrick 655321. I guess that's about it. But yeah, definitely consider giving this video a like, chime in the comments like what's your favorite Friday the 13th film? Were we absolutely right? Were we absolutely wrong? Let us know. I'll probably
I
regret.
mean, we're gonna read the comments, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I don't care. But we want to know. So,
Yes, we
um,
do appreciate them. So chime in, and definitely consider hitting that subscribe button, because we do this video. There is plenty of other great content. Like I do a lot of interviews. I just did a really cool one that like should be up in the next couple of days. Just a little tease there, but you know, a really cool horror director who also did a Godzilla film. So just a little tease there. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.